Hey everyone, it's Simon Mainwaring here from First, the CEO and founder, and I really appreciate you taking some time this morning to join us for a webinar. It's a super special webinar because our guest is Colleen Vien, who is the Sustainability Director at Timberland. And we've been lucky enough to do some work with Colleen and her team, and I came away from that process, our whole team came away with just such admiration for the brand and so much shared learning in terms of what it takes to be not only a purposeful brand, but a profitable brand to that end. And so I wanted to sort of invite us all to not only learn from Colleen and the insights she's going to share with us today, but also to volunteer your questions, because it's a rare opportunity to kind of tap into the insights and learnings of someone who truly is a global leader. And I think just as context, you know, Timberland has always been regarded not just as a leader in the footwear and apparel category, but really as a global leader in terms of their product, the quality of their product, their famous yellow boot and beyond, but also their sustainability leadership around the world, long before, decades before, you know, other brands were really thinking this way, and also their leadership just in terms of how they imagine the role of business in the world. And I think as we've all noticed over the last several years, many other brands and businesses have now started to rise to this challenge, whether you're a startup or a multinational, but no one has the insights and expertise that a company like Timberland has after decades of leadership. And so the goal today is to really offer value by sharing the insights that Colleen and her team and Timberland, the brand, has really earned over the last several decades. So Colleen, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it, and welcome to the webinar.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
And so let's dive in. And I really want to stress to everyone who's joining us today that you can fire your questions off to us. There's a Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. You just enter your questions there, or you can email contact@wefirstbranding.com, contact@wefirstbranding. Those questions will come to us. And then we're going to be taking 15-20 minutes at the end to answer your questions. So this is really about giving you the insights you need. But let's start the discussion with a few questions that we've thought about in the first place. I mean, many people think that they know the Timberland brand. They're very familiar with the iconic yellow boot and beyond. But I think very few of us realize the origin story of the brand and how purpose has always been built into the very story of the brand. So Colleen, could you speak to us a little bit about where the brand began and how that's informed the brand ever since, the idea of purpose?
Yeah, happy to. It's a great story. So the company started back in 1970, roughly 71, and in 1973 was when they designed that famous icon boot, the yellow Timberland boot. Right. Now that boot was designed intentionally for one thing, to allow people to strap it on and be able to step outside and get work done and to make something happen, right? And it was from the very beginning had a very strong purpose. And that then led to the three family generation that led the company for the first 30 years. Nathan Schwartz was the individual that created that innovative yellow boot, the first waterproof, truly waterproof boot that didn't have a bootie on the inside. The boot itself was truly waterproof. His legacy then was that boot and that innovation and that thinking outside the box and problem solving. That was what his legacy was to the business. His son, Sidney, comes along, and his legacy then is to take that boot and take that business and make it global. And so he really built the brand and really was the gentleman that back in that day, people weren't putting brands on their footwear. This was before the Nike swoop. This was before Adidas was doing it. And so he wanted to actually take a brand and put it on the branding iron, so to speak, and put it on the boot. So his legacy to the company was the brand. And then his son, Jeffrey Schwartz, comes along and he says to himself, well, what's my legacy to the company? We've got grandpa with the boot, we've got dad with the brand. What's his legacy? What's he going to leave behind? And he felt very firmly that commerce and justice could live together and should live together, and that businesses should be about giving back and not just providing a product, but how do we not just reduce our environmental input, but how do we actually make the world a better place? And so that was the journey. And so right from the beginning, I feel like purpose was always there. It's just it got refined and actually grew into something much bigger when Jeff came along. And then we went into a new generation of leadership when we got acquired by VF Corporation in 2011. And what's beautiful about the new journey that we're on is that with the support behind us of a large company like VF Corporation, who itself actually is truly grown to believe in the power of purpose in business, and that without having purpose, being a purpose-led business, your business can't grow. With that, we found at Timberland that the days of being so strongly rooted in commerce and justice are actually back. And it's a really exciting time here at Timberland. We actually just went through in the last 12 months, as you know, as you were one of the many people that we spoke to about our purpose statement, because we have had one for many, many years. We've had CSR in place for 25 years, path of service for our employees to do community service hours, paid time off to do that. We've had that for 25 years. We've been doing this for a long time. And so we've always had a purpose, but we didn't really have a good, strong way to articulate it and to message it both internally and externally. Right. And we just went through that journey with you and came through on the other side with I think what comes back full circle, Simon, to what that first story was that I said about the yellow boot and what it was for, right? So if I may share what our statement is.
Please.
So our new refined, refreshed, and refueled purpose statement, we're really excited about. And that is that as a business, we feel that we are here to inspire and equip the world to step outside, work together, and make it better.
Right. Well, I'm a fan definitely of that. So yes, that's really exciting for the brand. And I took away three things from what you just shared in terms of those who are listening and what they can learn from the journey of Timberland. The first is the product was designed specifically to have a purpose, a meaningful purpose out there in the first place. Secondly, you didn't have to earn leadership buy-in. Leadership buy-in was a given. It was there. It was a permission slip for the entire company to be more purposeful and to lead with purpose, from Jeff especially. And so, do you need leadership buy-in these days? Absolutely. And then thirdly, the articulation of the purpose itself. It's one thing to have an instinct to be a purposeful brand. It's another to really articulate what that is, to guide not only those outside the company, but also those inside the company. And let me ask you a different question. We hear a lot about purpose and profit and purposeful branding these days. And in the abstract, and supported by a lot of data that's out there now, it makes a lot of sense. But the practice of it is slightly different. It's a very real meat and potatoes, rubber hits the road business that you're in, where you've got to sell product. So just in a direct experience kind of way, how do you see purpose showing up in a way that helps build the business, in a way that helps drive sales, so people know that this is real and it's not just, good optics? You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. So I'll give you two versions of the answer to that, which is sort of what we've been doing and what we aim to do, what we're planning to do going forward. What we've been doing is a lot of great work, right? We've done over 1 million hours of community service across the globe. We've planted almost 10 million trees across the globe. We've worked very hard to put sustainable materials into our products. And yet by doing that, we've been doing it because we know it's the right thing to do. We haven't really been talking about it and telling that story and engaging our consumers in that journey with us. So what has been thus far the strongest business driver as a result of being purposeful inside our company and living our values every day is that we attract and we retain like-minded individuals that believe in our being, that it's more than about products. And we've been able to keep some really strong talent as a result of that. And we've also seen it be very powerful in connections with our customers. So our customers, I refer to them as being our wholesale accounts, and the retail doors beyond the Timberland doors that are selling Timberland products. Rather than having a sales meeting or a meeting with our wholesale accounts and then taking them out for dinner. Right. We invite them to strap on their boots and step outside and let's do some community service together. And that has forged some really powerfully strong relationships with our wholesale accounts, different than any kind of dinner would ever garner.
Yeah. I mean, that shared experience of impact and contribution, it sort of forges a different bond with, the people that, your partners in business. Now that definitely, that's really interesting and a different strategy. I mean, I don't think there's many businesses out there that extend their purpose to almost every stakeholder in their business, including their customers. So that makes a lot of sense. And
I need to keep moving, or our motion sensor lights are.
I love that. See, you've got energy saving lights on. I feel guilty now that our lights are staying up all the time because you're the only ones with energy saving lights. The point is well taken, both for the talent you attract and keep, and also for your relationship with customers. Purpose has shown up as a real driver of business growth. One thing I'm also mindful of is that around the world, your consumer base, and I don't like the word consumer because of the implications of consumption, but the people that buy Timberland products, the brand shows up in lots of different ways. So in EMEA, which is, loosely describes Europe, there's one experience of the boot, which is a very social and community kind of focused boot. In North America, the service idea is larger. We know in APAC, in Asia, that there's a different resonance in terms of, getting away from work and relaxing on the weekend and so on. How do you calibrate the different regions around the world? How do you, when you talk about the articulation of a purpose and so on, what do you try and do to balance the different regional expressions of the brand and its products?
I think the products are showing up a little bit differently in each of those markets, but the consumer insights research that we've done across, we see our consumers as being sort of in three different types of individuals. The true outdoor enthusiasts that enjoy hiking and fishing and really enjoying the outdoor experience in its fullest. But reality is that a lot of our consumers are urban dwellers. And so we also have a lot of urban consumers that are not necessarily out in the true big outdoors all the time, but they're in their everyday lives, stepping outside and enjoying whatever they can within their own community. And then we have even, some of these younger, more hip and cool, I guess is the best way to say it.
Like us, right? Like us.
Yeah. Cool. I don't fit into that category anymore. I don't know if I ever did. But when we did the research across all of the regions about those consumer targets, and we also asked them about purpose, we actually wanted to know what did purpose mean to them in their life, and what did they think of Timberland's purpose statement. And we found a red thread. What we saw was that no matter where they were, each one of those consumer types agreed on the same thing. So if you're a true outdoor enthusiast, you're understanding about the impacts on the planet, and you want to see that impact reduced, and climate change is important, and tree planting is important. For our more urban consumers and for our younger savvy, street savvy person, they actually had the same alignment in terms of purpose is important, and they really want to connect with brands that also have purpose. Right. But more so on what they're seeing and what they're feeling and what they're experiencing in their communities. So it was less about the big environmental picture, and it was more about that social impact piece of it. And I think so. Then what does that say to us in terms of how do we bring purpose to life in each of these different markets? We are going to bring it to life in different ways, and it should be regionally focused and be unique and resonate for each of those regions differently. But at the end of the day, when you look at all of the different ways that we are planning to activate purpose with our consumers, it's all laddering up to one thing. And that laddering up is about that nature needs us, whether it be human nature or whether it be Mother Nature. We need to step up, and we need to step out and work together and make it better.
It totally makes sense. And that sequential order that you laid out is so instructive to everyone who's joined us for the webinar. You need to be very clear about who you are as a brand and have a very clear articulation of your own purpose. But then quickly, you need to deeply understand your consumer, the people who are buying your product, and what motivates them, and to really identify those red threads, as you say. And then as an extension of your focus on the consumer, the person buying your product, you then can activate your brand purpose in locally relevant ways, in ways that are going to be meaningful and relevant to them. And so there's this sort of nice symbiotic relationship between the brand and its purpose and the consumer and where they live in the world. And you know, it gives an opportunity to activate that purpose in a very specific way. So thank you for that. And
if I can just finish, so that was sort of like where we are. And then what we've done in the past, as I was saying, was we've been doing this work internally and not really messaging it out. Or if we messaged it out, it would be, okay, we've planted 10 million trees. Let's tell that story. Or we've done over 1 million hours of community service. Let's do that. Let's tell that story. But it's still telling the story about what we've done. And now what we want to step forward into is how do we invite our consumers to be a part of that process and a part of that journey and that movement that we believe in. So it's going to be more of an invitation going forward as opposed to telling the story of what we've done.
No, and that's a really important shift and a powerful shift, because they're not either or. It's just sort of extending what you've done internally to include consumers and I guess society at large more broadly. And that's truly when you become a movement out there in the world. I mean, you've been a movement in so many capacities all the way through, but I totally take your point, which is you're going to be even more of a movement by, you know, including on a greater scale consumers out there around the world. It's an interesting time. I think everyone who cares about branding and marketing and the role of products in our lives has noticed this shift from marketing to movement making, has noticed on the strength of movements out there in culture like Black Lives Matter and March for Our Lives and so on, that mapping across to the business landscape where you might see movements like Delete Uber or whatever it might be, where consumers and people who share the same values are coming together and really holding business accountable for what they do. That said, one of the oversights that we see sometimes is that people think the purpose only applies to your communications or to your CSR work, to that good work you're doing, rather than all aspects of your business. And in particular, to the very products you make and the innovation in and around your products. So, you know, it's one thing to say you stand for something. It's another thing to make sure that your products deliver on those same values. So how does sustainability inform your product innovation on an ongoing basis? Because you could probably save money or have more to sell doing things that are against your values. Yet my experience of the brand was that you are squarely focused on your values in terms of product innovation the whole time. So can you talk a little bit about how sustainability informs your products?
Absolutely. And that's been a journey as well. So, you know, in the beginning, when we recognized that the largest environmental impact of our products, when we did that assessment, that life cycle assessment of our products, it was the leather. The leather is the #1 largest environmental impact. And so we went first after that and helped to co-found what exists today is the Leather Working Group, which is a best-in-class environmental audit protocol that now tanneries are being asked to have done. And some brands like Timberland are saying, we're only going to do business with a tannery if it's able to achieve a silver or gold rating from that audit protocol. So we started there. And then what happened was back in 2007, we wanted to see what would happen if we built the most sustainable boot that we could using at that time, the best available sustainable materials. So recycled, organic, renewable, silver and gold rated leather, recycled rubber. And we built this boot called the Earthkeeper boot. And it did phenomenal. It sold like hotcakes. It was the only boot that ever outsold the yellow boot in a single year ever in history. So that's something to be said. And so that then said to everybody internally that it can be done. We can use sustainable materials. We can still achieve the cost price points and the gross margins, and we can do it. So you can't keep thinking that it can't be done. We've just proven that it can be done. And with that, then we started to say, well, what about other product categories? And what about other products, other SKUs of our footwear? And that Earthkeeper line became not just a boot, but a whole collection of different footwear and a different apparel. And even our licensees started to jump on this movement that we had created about Earthkeeper products. Before you know it, we had over 80% of the products in market were being branded as Earthkeeper products because we had proven that model out. Today, what's happened is we've actually removed that Earthkeeper name from all of the products except for the original boot. That is still will always be called the Earthkeeper boot. But we did that because it shouldn't be that you have one Timberland product that is an Earthkeeper product and one product that's not. It should be across all. Right. So now all of our products, all SKUs, are required to meet what is in essence the Earthkeeper standards that we had put forth prior for that one boot.
I mean, it's amazing. I think you mentioned that casually, but a lot of brands might have a flagship product that they can point to and say, hey, these, the values are reflected in that product, but many other products are not. And, by holding yourself accountable to that standard across your entire portfolio is that's a very conscious choice. And I'm sure it's quite cost intensive and capital intensive. And it's, that really is, leadership is funny. Leadership is not your relationship to others. It's more your relationship to yourself, how you're going to hold yourself accountable to your own standard. And that's a true demonstration of that. And, as fantastic as that is, I think every company at some point still faces that tension between purpose and profit. They have to kind of make a choice between doing something that is profit driven and doing something that's more purpose driven. And sometimes, we talk about it, well, what's that purpose filter? Like, how do you decide between those two things? What questions do you ask yourself, or what process do you go through to navigate that difficult choice? What happens inside Timberland when you're kind of at a bit of a crossroads, like any brand, any company, where you suddenly go, well, what do we do here? How do you navigate that so others can understand?
Yeah, so I want to go back to something that you just said in your remarks, in that doing that, what we had done in creating these environmental standards for all of our products must be cost intensive and capital intensive, I think you said. Yeah. And it's actually not. And so that's what I really want people to understand is that at first, if at first it is cost prohibitive, don't give up. Right? You need to continue to think innovatively and you need to find others. So there's been lots of examples in our history where if we couldn't find cost effective and quality performance driven recycled rubber in the supply that we wanted, we didn't just give up on that idea. We went and we partnered with the tire industry to then create a new rubber compound that then they would start to use so that then we would actually start to have the kind of recycled rubber that we would want to be using. So you don't give up. I think that's a really key learning that I've experienced personally here at Timberland is that sustainability doesn't have to be a barrier. It doesn't have to bring in more cost or more restrictions or more requirements. It's really about innovation and how do we solve for problems. And maybe you don't solve it by yourself. You partner with even people that you are competitive with in your industry sometimes. So I wanted to start there. But how do you make those decisions? Well, first of all, there's definitely going to be things that you would just never do, right? We're not going to source our products from factories that have child labor. We're not going to use a tannery that's polluting the river behind them, right? Some things you're just not going to do. And so there is no conversation about that. I think in the conversations about purpose or profits then starts to come into how do we make purpose a part of driving the profits? And how do we make it so that by doing purpose and being purpose-led, there's a way to engage more consumers. There's a way to engage more markets that we haven't even thought of before. There's a way to get more attention and get people to think about Timberland in a different way. So there may be examples of where it might cost more to be more purposeful, but if you can find that way to connect it back to the business, then it sells itself internally.
Yeah, I love what you said before when you sort of course corrected me there, because what you're saying, and this is so instructive for people who are tuning in, purpose is not some static noun that sits there on a page. It has to be an active, dynamic verb. You don't give up. You keep pushing. You ask the questions. You look for the solve. And what you said is so important, that purpose is actually an innovation driver. because when it presents a problem like that, then that's an opportunity to unlock some innovation. And then, as you said, it's an opportunity. The sensors on those lights are fantastic. You're saving enough energy for us, both of us. I love that. And then it's an opportunity to partner with people that you might not otherwise partner with. So there's 3 points just in what you said. First is that purpose needs to be a verb. It needs to be something living, a full contact sport on a daily basis, something that's alive inside the organization. Secondly, it's an innovation driver. And thirdly, it can lead to unlikely partnerships, even with competitors, to help you execute against that purpose. And then, as you say, in terms of the purpose filter inside the organization, recharacterizing purpose as an opportunity to drive profit is a transformative mindset. People either look at them in opposition right now, which is a false separation, or sometimes they feel like they've got to choose between one or the other at any given moment in time. But what you're saying is, how can you blend those two? And as you had with the Earthkeeper experience, it can be enormously profitable for the company. Thank you for that. And, as you look out on the business landscape today, from the hindsight of a brand that has been a leader for so long, and you see these new companies coming into the fold and talking about their purpose and doing ad campaigns about it and so on, is there any cautionary tale that you might share with them? Is there any learning on the way that you might share with younger, newer companies coming into this space? For example, there's a PR crisis, or a market just doesn't respond to a product at a given time, or a new competitor comes in and is sort of stealing your thunder, or whatever it might be. Like, is there any sort of challenge that you've seen over the years? You go, wow, that was an interesting moment in time, and here's what we did about that.
For us at Timberland?
Yeah, for you at Timberland, yeah.
I don't know if this is answering your question really, but what pops in my head is, we have had moments where we've told the story to consumers.
Right.
We have had ad campaigns that were very specifically about purpose, stemming back to, give racism the boot. Was a very large ad campaign that we did, and that was very controversial back then in the 80s. And also more recently in the early 2000s with Nature Needs Heroes, we did an ad campaign called Nature Needs Heroes, and it was disappointing to see how those ad campaigns didn't resonate in terms of the traditional marketing metrics that the business was looking for. And so both of those campaigns got dropped pretty quickly after one campaign, one season, because they weren't showing the same results, the traditional marketing results. And I think that's become a challenge that we've had to reprogram ourselves in terms of thinking about marketing, and that some messages, because they aren't just specific about a product specifically, that then would make somebody want to go in and actually convert that into a purchase, that it's about the brand itself. And that message, if you don't continue to tell that message continually, season over season, you're not going to have an identity, or you're going to look schizophrenic, and you're going to be a different personality each season. And so that's what we've actually had to overcome internally, is how do we look at the return on these messages, the messaging and the marketing campaigns, when they are truly about purpose. And we're ready to do that now. We're ready to take that leap again and go into it knowing that it isn't going to be a fall 19 or a fall 18 season campaign. It's going to be something that we're going to be saying season over season. And it's going to take a little while for the marketing metrics to show what traditional marketing metrics are looking for. But I think it takes a while for people to know and to trust, right? You think about just building trust with an individual, right? You don't instantly have trust in somebody the first time you meet them or the first time you hear them say something. It takes time, and you build that trust based on your actions. And so I think that's my advice back to the audience as well, is that you need to be consistent in what you're saying, but you need to also be authentic in what you're saying, and demonstrate it multiple times and over and over and over, because it's through that repeated, consistent action of authentic action that then you're going to build that trust. And that's what at the end of the day, that's what we're looking for, is that brand loyalty. Yep. And that trust between consumer and our brand, and not just our brand, but what our products can offer them in their life.
Yeah, it's such a powerful point you're making there, because every brand is trying to establish an emotional connection to their buyer and to inspire the loyalty that will drive your business growth over time. Yet so much of marketing today, especially when it's data driven with all these tools, it's kind of transactional. It's all about real-time, instant sort of response. Yet, as you say, a brand needs to be very clear about who it is and maintain that over time. And it's interesting, a lot of people talk about if a brand truly wants to be purposeful, they need to suspend this sort of short-termism mentality where they're just looking to the next quarter and the next sales. But really, through the lens of the impact they want to have, they've got to take a longer-term view. And the same is true in establishing trust with your consumer, your buyer. You've got to sort of show up in a consistent way, because trust isn't earned in a moment. It isn't earned overnight. And so that's really, really powerful what you're sharing. And I mean, so many brands are still sitting on the fence. They're still wondering to themselves, well, you know, there are those leaders that have always talked to playing a positive role in society. Now there's a lot of newcomers who are doing it to various degrees of success. Some are genuine about it, some are a bit disingenuous. But there's still a lot sitting on the sidelines going, you know, in the absence of a greater tolerance for risk, we're just going to wait this out, or we're going to see what's happened, or we're not going to be part of this movement of business playing a role in social change. What would be your cautionary advice to them? What would you say to someone sitting on the sidelines who's got a brand? They may be a solopreneur just starting a company or a large company, and they're sitting there just watching what's going on, and they're not really playing an active role in change. What would you say to them?
It's a true differentiator. And so it is one of many ways that you can differentiate yourself in your category and whatever product or service you're offering. And if you're allowing somebody else to do that before you do, you've lost an opportunity, and you're then only going to be referred to or perceived as jumping on the bandwagon, right? And Timberland, actually, we think about that here too. I wonder about that too. Because we have been doing it for years, but we haven't been vocal about it. We've been quiet about it because we're humble. We haven't been shouting it from the rooftops, but now we're ready to do that. And we're doing it, really, I feel like we're jumping on the bandwagon, because there are, particularly in our space even, companies that are messaging this and have been doing it for a long time, talking about purpose. But I think what's okay for Timberland in jumping on the bandwagon a little bit later than maybe we should have is that when we tell the story, we have the legacy, we have the heritage, we have the history, we have the stories of 25 years of what we've been doing to go along with us jumping on the wagon. So we're not too concerned about jumping on the bandwagon. I do wish we had been doing it many years ago, but that's okay, because I think we're going to be able to differentiate ourselves as a true, authentic, purpose-led company from the beginning.
Yeah, no, I think absolutely that's true. And I also think the marketing landscape has changed. I mean, I think we all know, those who are watching this webinar, that all the data around millennials and Gen Z bears out the fact that they are more values-led. They want to know the good that a brand is doing. They want to know whether a brand is part of the problem or part of the solution, in which case it's wholly appropriate for a brand to sort of speak to what they're doing, not in a self-serving, chest-beating way, but in a way that really celebrates the impact that all stakeholders can have together. So it's not only what you say now, but how you say it that makes a difference. You know, in the context of what you're saying, with a lot of brands out there being purposeful, there's lots of different activations you see out there in the world where brands are bringing their purpose to life in a way that, you know, moves the needle and so on. Is there one particular example of all the things that Timberland does around the world that personally you're excited about, that you look at and go, wow, that just resonates with me. I love the fact that we're doing that. Just as an example of how you can bring a purpose of, you know, stepping outside and working together to make it better, how you bring that to life. What's one that you love?
Can I say two things?
Please.
Okay, so we've been planting trees for decades, right? We didn't start counting the trees when we first started planting trees. So since we started,
mistake number one.
Yes, that's a lesson to be learned too. Measure your impacts. So when we started tracking, though, we're now up to almost 10 million trees. And so we do that all over the world. We do 1 million trees 2 million trees now in the Horchan Desert in Inner Mongolia. We've done almost 7 million now in the Haiti. And we do 350,000 roughly every single year in the Dominican Republic, where we have our solely owned manufacturing facility there. So we've been planting trees forever. And one of the things that I'm really excited about, though, is that through consumer insights research, we learned that, you know what, your logo's a tree, you plant trees, that makes a lot of sense. It's good for the planet, it's good for the climate, but it just feels so far and distant. You know, you're talking about China, you're talking about Haiti and the DR. You know, what about right here, right in my own backyard, right? And that was an aha moment for us, that if we really want to invite our consumers onto the journey with us, we need to be doing initiatives that are more accessible to them. And our initiatives and our projects should be projects that are going to be, they're the benefactors of. So urban greening was launched 3 years ago. We're in our 3rd year of our urban greening commitment right now, where we set a public goal to be doubling our footprint in 5 major markets in 5 years. So doubling our footprint, meaning that whatever our retail space and presence is in that city, we're going to regreen or restore or create urban green spaces of the equivalent square footage. So we've actually, in year 3, at the end of what we have planned this fall, we have a major urban greening event happening in Chicago next week. We have a major urban greening event happening in New York in October, and then in LA in November. And when those 3 are completed, we will have accomplished our 5-year goal in just 3 years. So we're going to be upping the ante and releasing a new public goal around urban greening. But that I get really excited about, because that was an opportunity for us to, like I said, engage in the consumers and bring that message more back home. Now, that said, we haven't lost sight of these other large-scale tree planting initiatives that we've been committed to, and we'll continue to do those. And the one that I really want to tell you about also, the second example of what I'm really proud of, is our tree planting in Haiti. So in 2010, just before the earthquake hit there in Haiti, we had already decided that when we had learned of the deforestation magnitude in Haiti, and said, you know, if anywhere needs planting trees, this country needs it. But as a result of the earthquake and understanding that more about the poverty that also was rampant in that country, we wanted to plant these trees in a way that wasn't just about digging a hole and putting a tree in the ground and helping Mother Nature. We really wanted to think about that human nature, and how do we make tree planting more about societal impact and economic improvement for the residents of the country of Haiti. So we found this partner called the Smallholder Farmers Alliance, and together we crafted this program where, by way of planting trees, smallholder farmers are improving their crop yields and improving their revenue, their economic income, sending kids to schools for the first time that never did. The first round that we did was a 5-year commitment. We planted 5 million trees and improved the lives of 3,400 smallholder farmers. Over 3,000 school kids are now in school as a direct result of this program. So we did that. That was a 5-year commitment. And when that was finished, we also had challenged the Smallholder Farmers and Alliance to find a way to make it self-sustaining, that they shouldn't be dependent upon funding from Timberland or anybody else, that they had 5 years to figure out how to create a self-sustaining model. And they did that. They recognized that by planting a particular tree, the moringa tree, that moringa became an export commodity for these farmers. And so that's what's now perpetually keeping, and they continue to plant 1 million trees every single year and continue to improve the lives of more and more smallholder farmers.
I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing. I mean, what you're doing there outright is so personal in terms of how it transforms the lives of individuals out there. But the numbers themselves are really compelling. And when you think about this, when you step back for a second and think about business in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, where arguably it was profit for profit's sake and no one was really accountable for what's going on for a lot of companies, And then you look at this moment in time where brands are just showing up in really powerful ways, changing lives around the world. You know, I don't mean to sound naive, but you can get excited. You can get really excited and say, wow, what could we all do together to make a difference out there? At a time, it's more needed than ever, yes. But just the power of it is pretty breathtaking. I mean, before we go to questions and so on, if you had to lay out on a personal level or professional level, your hope or vision for the role of business in the world. I mean, we live in this planet that's increasingly challenged, whether it's the polar caps melting, climate change, or ocean acidification, loss of biodiversity, all of these things going on. It's demanding new behavior from business, but in a sort of cup half full kind of way. If you could lay out your vision for what you think business will look like in the next 5 to 10 years, or the role it would play, as someone who's been so passionate about this space for so long as I know, what would you say? Where do you see it going? What's your hope?
Well, it is true that businesses need to stand up and make a difference in the world. We all do individually. And so if we all feel that individually, and we all know that each individual on the planet has a responsibility to leaving this planet to the next generation, we all recognize that as human beings. So why does that get lost then when you step inside the doors of your offices? Why does that get lost, right? That's shifting. And so there is no individual accountability if there is no business accountability. And we've seen example after example and decade after decade of how there's just not enough happening, whether that be from individuals, whether that be from the governments. There's just not enough happening, and there's too much stalling happening. And I think businesses are perfectly positioned to leapfrog forward and start to bring change in large scale ways that right now we're just not seeing. And I think the power of it really is going to be when we do get the consumers on that journey with us. We need to have that happen, because that's when you start to see the behavior changes.
Right.
And people actually choosing to vote, so to speak, with their dollars on the companies that they are going to purchase from is by those companies that are actually doing and making a difference.
Yeah, completely agree. And what's a good carrot without a stick? That one coda to that, if you were to give a cautionary tale to brands that ignore this, what risk do you think they take if they just opt out of playing a meaningful role? What would you warn them against?
You can't opt out. You can't opt out. And in today's world, and it's only going to be more so in the future, the access to information is everywhere and easy. So you can't hide. You can't just sit back and pretend that nobody's watching, because those days are gone. So you really can't opt out.
Well, yeah, I mean, I feel the same way. I do feel like there's nowhere to hide today. There really is nowhere to hide. And whether it's a consumer looking behind a retailer to see how something was made and who the supplier was, or you just got a whole generations of consumers that are very actively involved in this dialogue with brands. I completely agree. And so, it's a new type of bravery for a brand to ignore the positive role that they can play. It can be very dangerous for them. And we're going to shift now to some questions that we've been receiving on the way through. So a question here we got was from Tracy. Can small brands take advantage of these principles, or do they only apply to large brands? Can small brands take advantage of these principles? Absolutely.
I think it's actually maybe even easier for smaller brands to adopt these principles and put it into action. It's sometimes the larger the organization, the more bureaucracy you'll face, the more people who need to be involved in making the decisions. So I think it's easier in many respects for smaller brands to adopt these principles.
I guess the question might have been pointed more to a lack of resources, but I guess whatever you can do in small ways, and sometimes it's not about giving money or allocating money, it can be, contributing in kind through expertise or time, right?
And just thinking about how you operate your business, right? If to be purpose-led isn't philanthropy,
right.
It isn't just going out and doing community service. It's really about how you operate your business, and that just requires conversations and
right.
thinking about what are we doing today and how can we make that more meaningful.
Right. And I've got, a kind of related question here from Bob. Is this applicable to B2B and B2C companies, or just direct to consumer? So is it applicable to B2B?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. I mean, in just my example of our wholesale accounts, right? I mean, that's actually where we started introducing our purpose with outwardly, externally, and not just to ourselves, was to our wholesale accounts.
Right.
So absolutely applicable.
Right. I actually don't even think there is a B2B anymore. I think B2B is B2C, in as much as there's so much imposed transparency. And I think increasingly B2B companies are being challenged to be as purposeful, if not more so that they can go to their customers or to retailers and equip them with a story that they can take to market. So it mitigates risks that they're going to be attacked because their supplier they're using is not, values aligned. But it also, in a proactive, positive sense, you can give that retailer or customer a story that they might not otherwise have, that they can then take to market. So again, I think what you shared earlier is really important. You can look at a cup half empty, which is, do we have to think about purpose? Or you can look at it as cup half full and say, could purpose be an innovation driver? Could it be a value add to our customers, and so on for B2B companies? Olga, another question here. To what extent can you be transparent without being too vulnerable? Thank you, Olga. I think she's meaning, do you expose the company too much in some ways? Like if you put your hand up and invite scrutiny, can that be dangerous for you?
Well, it could be, depending on your circumstances and your situation. So if you're doing something bad,
I guess, yeah, right.
Then yes.
Yeah.
But, I get asked this question a lot. Timberland was one of the first companies, in fact, I think it was the first company to publish its factory list online. So openly transparent about all the 300 plus partners that manufacture our goods. We started doing that in 2008. And I get asked that a lot. Like, wasn't that risky? Why do you do that? Isn't that exposing yourself to scrutiny? And my answer back is absolutely. And I welcome and I thank anyone who ends up identifying an issue that is happening with one of our suppliers that we weren't aware of. Right. We do a lot to make sure we are aware and that we've selected the right partners. But if there's something happening and I don't know about it, I want somebody to find that out and to tell me. So there's also a positive flip to being open and exposed and being very transparent like that.
Yeah, it does. It holds you set up a cycle or a dynamic where you're being held to an ever higher standard because you're being accountable and so on. So Patricia, we have a question there for Patricia. How Timberland investors relate to the sustainability decisions and if they participate in any way to make these decisions? Thank you. So do the investors participate in any way? How do they contribute to the questions or to the issues?
Yeah, that's a bit of a different challenging question for me to answer because Timberland is no longer publicly traded directly. We were a publicly traded company prior to being purchased by VF Corp, but so now it's VF that involves or engages itself with the investors, and absolutely, when VF made the announcement to purchase Timberland back in 2011, there were three primary reasons that they gave for recognizing that this was a strong purchase opportunity for them. The first thing that they mentioned was our leadership in sustainability and corporate social responsibility.
Right.
So they were doing that intentionally to send a signal to the investors that VF is a brand, is a company that thinks about values and purpose and ethics and responsibility in making decisions. And they've grown into a place today where I think VF Corp is doing an amazing job of really holding itself accountable in terms of ethics and responsibility and sustainability. And they engage their investors in those topics whenever and often. Yeah,
it's kind of like you're under siege from all sides. You've got your consumers, you've got your investors, you've got your employees who are holding you accountable. It's the new normal, and it's a good thing because in some sense it makes it easier, to your point, to be authentically purposeful because you've got a lot of checks and balances within your own organization and your stakeholder community. We'll take a couple more questions, and we've got Anthony here. What's the biggest challenge you face today when trying to invite your customers to be part of your sustainability journey? So what's your biggest challenge today when trying to invite your customers? So I think Anthony means by that consumers. So how do you get them involved? How do you get them to care? How do you get them to participate?
Yeah, the just making sure you're telling the story and messaging it at the right points of interaction. So when it's about our products, when you go to our features and benefits page about any one of our products, there's always going to be mention of what is the recycled, organic, or renewable. How are we working with leather, silver rated leather, tanneries? We talk about that. And so that can't be a separate conversation. When somebody wants to know about your product, you have to tell them that.
Right.
So it's been easier to talk to consumers about what's in our products because there's a natural platform, a natural means of communicating that information to them. To get people to care, though, is a completely different topic. And to say that we're using organic material or recycled or renewable is one thing, but to say why we do that, and as a result, what is the positive impact on the world, or what have we mitigated from happening as a result of that, that's a much harder conversation to have. And we haven't found the right equation. We haven't found the right means of that right level, because you only have so much time, so much attention span. How do you convey that without losing them? And so that is a struggle. I will say that we have not solved for that. We can say what we're doing, but the why, and that's the why is how you're going to get people to care. Yep. And that's the part that we're just not there yet.
Yep. No, there's always something to work on, which is great. I mean, and I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm going to. You
haven't already?
No, I haven't already. Just getting started. No, the opportunity. If you were to kind of share with the folks who are listening just a few pointers, things that come to mind as you just sort of step back from the incredible journey that you've been on with Timberland for years. If you could just give a few bits of hard-won advice. There's no right or wrong, but you're like, wow, if I could tell you one thing, just think about just anything that comes to mind where you go, this is something we've learned the hard way. We'd love to share it with you. Is there anything that comes to mind? Any pointers that you'll share with your team internally, or when you talk to colleagues at events that you just go, wow, this has really been a powerful insight? Is there anything that you share? How's that for you?
I think it is a journey. It can be a very frustrating place to be when you know what needs to happen and what needs to change in the world. But you can't just snap your fingers and make it happen overnight. So it can be frustrating, and it can be demotivating at times. And so my advice back to people who are in this field or are looking to get in this field is always to stay optimistic realism is how I like to say it, right? You have to be optimistic that change can happen. But you also have to be realists in that it's going to take a journey to get there. It's going to take some steps. And don't forget to celebrate the wins along the way. Sure. You need that to stay motivated and to bring people into your journey with you. Right. So if you're only focused on that end goal and you're not happy until you get there, nobody's going to want to join your movement and your journey, right? So you need to celebrate and along the way. Yeah. So optimistic realism, pleasant and persistent patience.
Pleasant and resistant patience.
My 3 Ps.
No, these are, it sounds, it's easy for us to joke about it, but that's mindset that you maintain on the way through is so critical, because it is a long journey. And yes, everyone's come a long way and we see that the momentum is building up, but there's still a long way to go. And I feel like the challenges that we're going to face are just increasing. So it's almost like our response needs to increase. And I think personally that we're going to have to learn to collaborate in new ways. We're going to have to learn to work together to kind of meet these challenges with equal force. And so, the whole point of doing these sorts of webinars, and for Colleen sharing her expertise, is to help all of us learn what we need to do to contribute to this movement of business being a force for good. And there's nothing more powerful than the insights of someone like Colleen and a brand like Timberland. So Colleen, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your wisdom with everybody, and inspiring us to hold ourselves accountable to a higher standard. It's it's tough, it's rewarding, but, you know, I think we've known each other a while, and 10 years ago, we may have wanted to get to this point where everyone's talking about it. But now is not the time to be complacent. Now is the time to double down on our efforts because the needs are so acute. So thank you so much for sharing some time and for sharing your insights. And, you know, if anyone still has more questions that they want to share, they can fire them to us and we'll make sure we get answers to you. And then, you know, the last thing I'll do is I want to share, as part of the sort of role that WeFirst plays, you know, in helping business become a force for good. You know, we've created a couple of courses out there that some of you might know about. One is all about how to find success through your personal purpose, and another is how to accelerate business growth through purpose. We put those together so that we could take all the learnings and the insights that we've developed through our consulting and our work and make them available to you, whether you're a solopreneur, a startup, a social entrepreneur, or a larger company out there. So on a personal level, defining your personal purpose is incredibly important to your health, well-being, and fulfillment, your success in life. And on a company level, it's absolutely critical for all the reasons that Colleen just laid out. So if you're interested in your personal purpose and your company purpose and how to define and activate it, check out wefirstworks.com. Have a look. You'll see all the information about the courses there. Most importantly, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for everyone for your time. Thank you to Colleen and for Timberland for their insights. And we look forward to sharing more information very, very soon. Thanks so much. Bye, Colleen.
Bye. Thank you, Simon.
Yeah.